Killer robots and autonomous weapons, global unemployment, mass surveillance, superintelligence. There are a host of fears about artificial intelligence and related industries, such as machine learning. But what exactly are they? How are they being used? What, if anything, do they offer the development sector? Are we at the beginning of a fundamental transformation of a business model that in many ways is no longer fit for purpose? Will they trigger an industry-wide digital disruption that will challenge the dominance of the largest development organizations, or serve to exacerbate the divide between the developed and the less developed economies in the world? In this episode, I sit down with Alice Schmidt, a thought and practice leader on sustainability, artificial intelligence, and social impact. Together, we'll delve into the benefits, opportunities, and risks tied to utilizing artificial intelligence in the development sector. We'll also discuss its influence on both the green and digital transition. Alice, thank you for joining Inclusive Plug powered by RECONOMY.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Alice, a mere decade ago, artificial intelligence was confined in science fiction films and books, far removed from discussions on economic development, unemployment, and addressing system constraints. Now, fast forward to today, where AI is more accessible than ever, thanks to advancements in computing power and software, better infrastructure, and improved machine learning algorithms, especially deep learning and widely available data sets. Alice, could you tell us what are the opportunities for using artificial intelligence in development, including more specifically the green transition? If I can be more blunt, can artificial intelligence contribute to creating access to decent and green jobs? And are there tangible benefits for the communities we serve?
Well, great questions. Let me perhaps start by pointing to what you started with. It's absolutely true that these issues, now, what does AI do with us? What impacts does it have on the economy, on society, are really moving to the forefront of important political and economic debates. The questions, I think they've always been there, but they were not sort of really out in the public. Yeah, I think that's really what is different now with the ChatGPT hype. People like you and me are now discussing AI. We even wrote an entire book about it. And I think that's really, that's a very important time, perhaps even a turning point in time, because now we still have time to shape, to co-shape how AI is developing and whether it's actually gonna, bring more challenges for development, for international development, or more opportunities, right? So very important, technology is not neutral. A lot of people that develop technology, that own, technology, are, how shall I say? I mean, they're very much focused on developing certain technological solutions, but many of them don't sort of look at this bigger picture, which I think is just so important. So what does that mean for education? How is it used in healthcare? What does it mean for the economy? And very importantly, what's the power behind that? Like, who owns the technology? Who makes money from it? What are the incentives? So I think these are really the important questions that we're grappling with today. So, I mean, one of the key message, therefore, also in our book, Fast Forward, is to not leave AI to techies only, but to involve people like you and me that work in international development, that deal with sustainability, that, want to sort of maximize societal progress, that want to be thinking about regenerative and inclusive practices. Now, when we talk about opportunities, and there are many, I think we should recognize that environmental, social, and economic issues are linked, right? And in a very complex world, I think it's important to really create win-wins, and it's possible. It's important that we don't sort of think only of the ecological side or only of the social side, but really try to create solutions that benefit all of them, right? That requires long-term thinking, etc. But I mean, to make this a bit clearer here, what are the actual opportunities? So let's start with the social side, and I'll give an example from my own personal experience. I've been teaching sustainability to international students for more than a decade. And about 10 years ago, I had a student in class who was hearing impaired, who approached me before class and said, hey, I really want to join, I'm really interested in the topic. Can you make sure that you'll be speaking slowly, that you'll be looking at me, and so that I can actually follow your course? And, I'm very much about inclusion. That's very dear to my heart. And of course I said yes. And I had every good intention to help this student and include this student and make sure that she participated, that she was fully able to participate in class. And I completely failed. Yeah, I was not able to speak slowly enough for her purposes. I was not able to focus on her only because there were, 30 other students that I also wanted to engage with. In the end, that didn't end well. The student, after a while decided to not continue the course. The university, wasn't like angry with me or anything, but personally, I felt this was a great disappointment. Now, fast forward 10 years, today, this would be much, much less of a problem because today, we have voice to text and text to voice technologies, artificial intelligence that would help this student in that case follow the class, right? By just using an app that recorded my voice and translated it into text, into written text for the student. So that's one aspect of inclusion. There are many other opportunities, many other models, AI models and apps that sort of, empower, that use AI, the power of AI for inclusion. One of the favorites, one of my favorites is one called Lumen, and basically it enables blind people to navigate through supermarkets. Right, there are others that help. In this case, also blind people, read what's on tins, right? Like products they have at home, right, to make sure when they are cooking, for example, right? So there's a lot of that there. It's very interesting also to actually understand that what's possible today with technology, including AI-powered technology, has even started questioning the concept of disability. Like, what's a disability? There's an example of an MIT professor, Mr. Hare, who actually lost a leg in an accident. And since losing a leg and, wearing an artificial leg, which is, of course, highly powered, he's actually become a better climber than he was before. And there are now people thinking about wanting to achieve the same results in climbing, in rock climbing, and feeling disabled with their real leg. So that, I think, is really interesting in terms of opportunities. On the environmental side, I also think there are a lot of opportunities. I've worked a lot in climate, I work a lot in circularity. There are apps, for example, or AI-powered technologies that make it much easier and much faster, for example, to recognize a wildfire, to detect a wildfire. And so they can basically reduce, right, the amount of trees that are burning down, and therefore the amount of CO2 that's emitted. They also allow, to sort of better track and monitor fire services, etc. You might have heard of the ocean cleanup. That's a pretty interesting initiative that's been around for a while, but basically they, suck plastic waste that's bound for the oceans out of rivers and sometimes also out of the ocean itself. And AI now helps to recognize trash faster, right? There are AI systems that allow us to know where to focus reconservation efforts or conservation efforts, right? That analyze nature. There's also a lot of room for citizen engagement. The iNaturalist app is one that, helps everyone basically around the world recognize species, report sightings of species. So really lots of opportunities there. I could go on, but perhaps,
Yeah.
wanna
And yet, as we embrace AI's potential, as you were just mentioning, are there risks associated with it in development? Is artificial intelligence truly effective in development, or does it perpetuate biases and discrimination that necessitate our vigilance as development practitioners?
Well, so that's a very big question. So yes, there are enormous risks. Yeah, AI clearly is not a silver bullet. AI can help in many ways, but first of all, it comes with its own environmental impact. Yeah, and that impact is significant. I'm not saying the impact, should prevent us from using it, this negative environmental impact, like the e-waste, right, the emissions, etc. But it's something that should be managed and can be managed. Yeah. I'm not going to go into detail unless you're interested, but I think it's a very interesting and very relevant field as well, how to minimize the environmental footprint of AI, right, and technology more broadly. But then there are, of course, much broader risks, right? And these risks concern, misinformation, for example. Misinformation, with social media, etc., has been a growing problem for a while. But with AI, it actually becomes much easier to create en masse and spread misinformation, right? There are quite a few cases now of AI being very explicitly used in election manipulation, right? You and I know what this means for development, right? And for democracy. So that's a big problem. More broadly, power, right? We all know how important power is in giving, a voice to people, in benefiting, those that perhaps have been included, marginalized, etc. And that becomes harder because there are certain groups, certain companies in particular, but also certain governments that just have an advantage in owning the technology and owning data. And we could actually see this polarizing further unless we really work hard at regulation, at engagement, etc. Yeah, so there's a lot of issues there, and I know that you're so interested in jobs, of course, as a RECONOMY program. So AI has been, or from what we understand now, has not had exactly the effect that people had been anticipating on the world of work. Right? It's not like creative jobs where sort of the hardest to replace. No, actually, we used to think, right, it's more like sort of manual labor that can be easily replaced, and often it's the opposite. We still see those carpenters and electricians and so on thriving. We see artists or architects right now understanding that this can have a real impact, right? And it's not the case that AI just blanket sort of cuts down lots of jobs, and for a long time it's going to be about humans working together with machines and each doing what they're best at. But we do see some studies that show how actually the very jobs that are lost are the ones held by women, for example, right? Or by those who are already in a more insecure situation. That's an issue. And there's also another side to that a lot of people don't know about. And that's sort of all these, we can call them bullshit jobs or platform jobs that are being created in the name of rendering AI safe and, sort of politically correct. You might have heard of all these people, for example, in Kenya. We heard lots of stories where people are employed at very, very low wages, of course, with very little or no job security, with no ability to speak out. And their job involves watching the most horrid parts of the internet, abuse, torture, you name it. And that's basically their job. And then they have to sort of, rate this or tag those kind of images, so that when we use ChatGPT, don't see this or don't hear those kind of things. But of course, that is not the kind of jobs we want to create, right? To lift people out of poverty and in a sort of inclusive way. So it's quite nuanced. Yeah. So yes, there are lots of risks. There's also warfare is changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's an argument that wars may actually become longer as they're more automated, which could be, good in terms of, less human casualties, at least per annum. But then we see protracted wars, we see investment in wars rather than in inclusivity and sustainable development. And of course, war has a huge environmental impact, negative environmental impact, which isn't even counted, and which again then basically puts at risk the very people that do not benefit from AI, right? We know that the data sets, they're usually filled with data that's not specific to many of the local sort of cultures and contexts that we deal with in international development. The languages aren't there, right? Yet the people in many developing countries are the ones that really feel, feel climate change much more than, we do in Europe,
Right.
for example. So lots of risks and challenges really there, and they need to be managed, right? And so in the end, what we need is systemic change, right? That's what many
Exactly.
of us are saying for a while, and AI is not going to bring that per se.
Thanks, Alice. And can artificial intelligence finally help us in localizing development? Can AI kind of limit or foster the extent to which development organizations seek to incorporate the views and voices of the communities we serve into the design of our interventions?
Yeah, so that's a very important question, of course, right? And again, in principle, in theory, yes, right? There are tools that collect, people's voices and opinions, automatic translation services, right? AI has really improved translation to sort of lots of different languages, and all the opportunities in terms of voice to text, text to voice, all of that, in principle, makes it easier from a technical point of view to reach people, to engage with people, to involve communities, and so on and so forth. But you probably know as well as I do that this doesn't necessarily translate into meaningful action, right? Meaningful engagement also, involves informed consent, communicating sensitively across countries and cultures. And it involves acting on what the people say, right? And as long as we are sort of confined by, entrenched structures and our systemic limits, that's very hard. Again, we cannot change system with the tools and structures that created them. Yeah. So
Right.
from a technological perspective, yes, but it's very hard actually to break, or we must work, right, together to break out of these systemic barriers and really meaningfully engage people in localized development.
No, thanks, Alice. And the speed and complexity of today's technological advancements are unparalleled, prompting discussions whether these changes are surpassing the evolution of our culture and institutions. And the executive chairperson of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, believes that, to quote, "We stand in the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another," end quote. What do you think about it? Do you agree?
So, first of all, I don't often agree with Klaus Schwab, particularly when it comes to inclusion and regeneration. Is this changing our culture or not, right? The question is, how big is the transformation? How much of a revolution is it? How transformative is it? Personally, I feel that at the moment it's still not moving us where we need it to be. So at the moment, I don't think it's changing culture or cultures more broadly into the regenerative and inclusive space that we have to get to. It's clearly changing, and then of course it has a fundamental impact on on the world of work, on education, on healthcare, on the economy. At the moment, I really see this though as change rather than as a radical transformation, which I think Klaus Schwab means. And again, that's because, I mean, he speaks from within the system, if you will, right? And what I mean by that is,
Right.
you know, a number of you know, many companies being much more powerful than entire nation states, right? It's about entrenched interest. It's about not pricing the carbon and the, you know, community engagement and so on in a way we should. So yes, a lot is happening, but we need to actually very proactively steer this change and this transformation. And that's why I co-wrote this book. That's why I think organizations like Helvetas and NGOs and many other actors that haven't traditionally been involved in the technological world, that really need to read up, engage, advocate, contribute to impact research, all these things that help us shape AI and therefore shape the world into the right direction.
One last question before we close it off. If you could predict the future, will machines replace humans?
Will machines replace humans? Well, I hope they won't. I certainly hope they won't. It would be a very, very sad world if they do. But yeah, machines will certainly replace some human roles and functions. I think that's clear. Yeah, but no, let's hope the world stays as colorful and more inclusive and regenerative than it is today. Perhaps just let me give you one example, because right now a lot of AI really isn't that intelligent. So what we learned when we developed the cover for our book, Fast Forward, is that there are a lot of things that, you know, humans just know and machines just don't, when they should be really obvious. And let me explain what happens. So we have a cover where, you know, a human finger touches a robotic finger, right? And that's sort of a classical image in AI and in human machine collaboration. And you know, my colleague who'd been developing this had been prompting, you know, the tool, the AI, and of course this takes a long time and invested a lot of work in it. And it looked really nice, and we were all happy with it. And only 2 days before the actual printing did we realize that it wasn't, you know, it was actually the middle finger touching. And clearly, you don't want to have a middle finger showing your middle finger, right, to the AI. Of course, it could have perhaps been interesting from a shitstorm perspective. But that's the kind of stuff, and of course we corrected it, yeah, but that's the kind of stuff that the machine doesn't know, and that's just so obvious for humans. And I think for a very long time it will stay like that.
Thank you very much, Alice, indeed. Thank you for being part of this episode.
Thank you, Sabin. All the best to you and your community.
The integration of artificial intelligence in our daily lives, and more broader, such as development, is undeniable. In our conversation with Alice Schmidt, it becomes evident that the rise of AI presents a dual-edged sword. On one hand, the advances in AI offer promising opportunities for the development sector, potentially providing solutions to long-standing problems such as ensuring access to green jobs and making development efforts more localized and inclusive. The technology's adaptability and capabilities can indeed play a significant role in reshaping the way we tackle development challenges and address global inequities. However, we can't afford to be blind optimists. The same algorithms and systems that hold so much promise also bring with them inherent risks. These include perpetuating biases and discriminatory practices, and the potential to further deepen the divide between the developed and the less developed economies. As with all tools and innovations, the key lies in how they are applied and monitored. We as development practitioners will need to approach AI with a healthy dose of caution, ensuring that its deployment doesn't harm the varying communities we aim to serve. Finally, as we stand on the cusp of what many believe to be a technological revolution, it's imperative that we understand its broader societal implications. This isn't just about economic development or technological progress. The conversation touches upon the very fabric of our societies and the future we envision for ourselves. The integration of AI into the development sector in our lives will undoubtedly be transformative, but whether that transformation is for the better largely depends on our actions and decisions today.